Hello and welcome to our Zoom conversation of parenting through Halloween. I have been joined by two wonderful parents as we explore this season with Jesus in the forefront of it all. I am Meg, and I would love for you to join in, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee and enjoy what we're going to say. So, hey guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Laura. I have two children, Ella and Liam. So Ella is 10 and Liam is 7.
Wonderful.
Amazing. I have two children, a little boy called Albie and a girl called Hazel. Hazel's 4. Albie is that weird gap between 1 and 2 where nobody actually really knows how many months old they are. It's like 16 and a half months. It's like, why don't you just refer to him as 1 or 2? So somewhere between 1 and 2, he exists, and he's a lively little boy.
That's sure. So Hazel and Albie are also my children because Jake is my husband.
What?
So we have partnered together on this chat and conversation.
Together, we're married. We're going to leave in all these bits, by the way.
So, guys, we're going to just explore through a little conversation about how we parent in this season. Obviously, all of our children are very different ages. It applies to your children, Laura and Hazel, probably more than it would to Albie. But, he experiences stuff, he's seeing stuff. So it's good to open up the conversation for future anyway. So I guess our first question would probably be, why do we not celebrate Halloween?
We don't celebrate Halloween purely because we're Christians. I think from my perspective, I don't see how celebrating Halloween is compatible with living as a Christian, whereby we're supposed to live as children of the light. So I think there's just this contradiction whereby if you're living as children of the light, how can you then embrace and celebrate all the ghoulish stuff of Halloween and witches and wizards and the darkness that ultimately is portrayed. I just don't understand that, and I kind of feel I get a little bit annoyed by it and a little bit frustrated that it's sort of depicted as a harmless bit of fun when actually I think as Christians we are aware that these things are actually real, that the fruit of them is actually dark, and that there are things like witchcraft, there are things like Satanism, and they're not things to joke about. I think there's a serious element to that. So I think when we make fun of it, we almost make it as if it's nothing to be concerned about. And I think that's quite dangerous, particularly with regard to our children,
Yeah, it's having that conversation, that thought of, okay, what do you want to introduce your household to, your kids? I think you mentioned about being of light. And I think we were having a conversation earlier on that, okay, what actually is the origin? Where's this come from? I think we have a responsibility for our own life as well as for our children to look at what we permit and what we don't permit in our house as a culture, as a foundation. And I was saying that, I didn't actually massively know where Halloween came from. So then I had a little look into it and a little read up of, okay, what is the history of this festival as such? And looking into that, and I'd encourage you, if you don't actually know what the origin and the basis of it comes from, go and have a look, because I think it's important to not just go along with the flow of, okay, well, all these things happen in society. It's we're not called to just blend in with everything that's going on around us. We're called to make wise decisions and follow Christ and what he's asking of us. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look and understand and learn to then make a decision on whether it's something that you believe for your own family is something you want to permit. And I think, as you were just talking then, Laura, I think, what are you introducing into your home? Is it going to bring fear? Because fear is not of God. Is it introducing almost like those elements of fear and darkness into your house? Do we want to allow ghosts and witches and all these different things to be something that our kids are involved in and bring into our house and play around with? It's well, no. We were just, me and Meg, for clarity, is my wife, we're in a supermarket the other day, and our daughter, you go down an aisle and she's just like, Dad, why is that arm covered in blood? And there's just a severed arm on the shelf covered in blood. I'm like, my 4-year-old is going into a supermarket and is questioning why there's a severed arm on the side covered in blood.
Yeah.
What good does that do to my child? Does that build her up and uplift her? Like Scripture says, to think on good things, pleasing good thoughts.
Exactly.
In any way, is that beneficial to her? No.
No.
Going out and seeing these things on the streets in darkness, is any of that beneficial to her? No. And I think for us as a family, I think we believe personally that, I don't think there's anything beneficial in it. I think it is only introducing her to things like we're talking about Hazel, because as Meg mentioned, she's 4, and Albie in any conversations in the future, introducing them to things that aren't healthy. I don't think there's anything building and uplifting about it. But I think if you do want to go back to the origins and go back to the details of it, then the original festival as such, around the end of the harvest and the day before it and stuff like that, if you look at it, it is to do based on warding off the dead and spirits and things like that. So I think the foundations of it to me don't seem particularly healthy, and I don't think there's much in there that is healthy to take from. So I think that would be, Meg, unless you've got any other thoughts, that's kind of where we stand with it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes us, this is the reason we're doing this podcast, the reason we're putting effort into this season as Christians, is because we are surrounded by such darkness, and if we're surrounded by it, then we need to penetrate it with Jesus's light. And so I feel like in this season, I'm ever so much more thinking about light, talking about light, celebrating lovely, good things. So it's definitely something within our house that I feel is heightened in the sense of the talk about Jesus. And if you've been following along our Superbook page, that we've also, our Instagram page, we've been having like crafty ideas of how you can bring light into your children's lives, how you can bring light into the atmosphere around you. You know, we've got stars and glitter and candles and all these things to promote Jesus's light, because what do we have to do? We have to combat it. We have to combat the darkness with the light of Jesus.
And it is one of the most beautiful times of the year.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
definitely. I am obsessed with this time of year. Every time we leave the house, I'm like, baby, look at that tree. It's red. Look at that. Oh my gosh, look at that one. It's bronze. That one's gold.
Look at the leaves on the floor.
I'm literally, it's incredible how these greenery just changes to the most amazing autumnal colours.
Yeah.
So like, I think there's also a line as well. Is like, you don't need to get so hooked up about the association of items. For example, a pumpkin. I'm sorry, God created the pumpkin, and it's a vegetable that you can eat and you can make amazing food from it. Like, us as a family, we cover our houses in pumpkins. Houses, we don't have one house. We cover our house in pumpkins inside, because what we're doing is we're celebrating the season. It's got nothing to do with Halloween. Sorry, the pumpkin was there before Halloween was. So we're celebrating that. We're like, let's put it all over our house. Let's make it feel autumnal, just like we would with greenery at Christmas. Like, we get involved. We don't carve them. We don't put like skull faces into them, anything like that. If you want to get creative and put a cross or put a smiley face or whatever you feel like you want to do in your family, for us, we just decorate the outside of our house, or maybe like above the fireplace, with like autumnal colors of leaves and pumpkins, because that is this point of year. Like, they're in season. This is when they're harvested. So for us, that's what we get involved in. I don't think you need to get stuck up on, okay, well, I can't touch pumpkin because that's to do with Halloween. I think, no, that's the association of marketing. I don't think that's the origin of a pumpkin.
Yeah, and pumpkin soup is delicious, so it's definitely on our menu most weeks in this time of year. I guess, it'd be really good to find out like how your children respond to Halloween. Like, obviously we talked about Hazel, how she walked down the supermarket aisle and she saw something. But for you, Laura, your children are a bit older. How do they respond to this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty clear that we don't celebrate it. I think that for them, like, they don't like it. Like, genuinely, they have never felt like they were missing out, like not going to Halloween parties or stuff like that, because they just don't like it. So, for example, with our children, they watch different TV shows. If it's a Halloween themed episode, they would automatically turn it off or change the channel. And it's really funny. They were actually doing that the other day. There was a Halloween themed, I think it was The Simpsons. And they were like, oh no, we didn't watch that, Mummy, because it was Halloween themed. So it was like, we just did something else. So, and it's actually really quite, I I always feel quite encouraged as a parent that it's not like they've just sat there and been like, oh, I'm just going to watch it anyway because mum is not looking. It, like, in themselves, they really don't want to watch it. So I don't really feel like they've ever felt that's a thing that's bad, like they're losing out, because I wouldn't want them to think that, because there's other ways in which you can celebrate, like you were saying before, the good things and the happy things. So it's never really felt like that for them. And I think they've always been really clear on that from like a really young age. They've just not liked it. And the problem is, because we live in the world, we can't escape, you know, the severed arms in the supermarket. And even on Saturday, I went into town with Ella. A girl walked out of the shop with a witch's hat on. And then a few minutes later, we went into another shop and there was a girl walking around with a fake spider. And you're just like, okay. And you kind of, there's an acceptance of, right, the world are going to celebrate it. This is going to be a thing. And it doesn't really scare my kids in that sense because they're aware of it. But it's definitely not something where they're like, oh, mummy, can I have a witch's hat? You know, it would never go there because they know it's not a good thing. And I think the good thing with them being a little bit older is that we have been real with them. You know, it's not like, oh, it's just all pretend or it's just all fantasy and horrible. They know that there's actually a reality to it. And it's not to go into great depth about that at all, but to say there are such things as witches, there are such things as wizards, and people do get really caught up in this. And the fruit of that is not good. So you might think, you know, like I was saying before, it just being a little bit of harmless fun, but actually these things are real. And what can happen can actually go really dark. So the fact they're aware of that is really good.
And I think that's our role as such as a parent, is to obviously teach them, guide them, and help them grow up to follow God for themselves.
Absolutely.
And have that relationship. I think it's showing them, like, helping them understand the why behind it. Okay, why don't we celebrate it? Obviously, on their level, a 4-year-old doesn't need to know the ins and outs of dark spirits, whatever you think it is. But I think there's an element of, like, they know feelings. They know what feels good. They know what feels bad. And one of the things we've been trying to teach Hazel is a good choice or a bad choice. That she has the power to make that decision, and is helping her understand, okay, you see what's going on outside. This is why we're not involved and don't celebrate it. When you do see that, how does that make you feel? Or when you do recognize this, because then she will then grow up with the sensitivity and the ability to discern for herself, because God gives us the gift of discernment, right? So our prayer for our kids is that they would have conviction and discernment, so that as she grows up and she'll be faced with other decisions of the world, she can be like, no, I can see how that makes me feel worse than I did before. Or she'll be able to notice that and be like, okay, well, that's clearly not of God, and that's not going to uplift and upbuild me. So that's one of the things I think we would say is, okay, what sort of things do we want to teach our kids for when they're growing up through life? And I think this is a great opportunity to be like, okay, this is why, but also this, how do you think that makes you feel, or what do you think that does when you see it?
Yeah. I think Hazel, though, she's at this point of life where she doesn't actually know what she wants. She can't make that clear decision of no or yes. She sees her friends doing something and she's like, well, I want to. So I can't sit here and be like, oh no, Hazel doesn't do anything. You know, she sees
she wants
people
the
wearing
sweeties.
Sorry?
She'll want the sweeties. She sees kids going around and getting sweeties. Why would
and
a kid
loves
not
dressing
want that?
up.
Yeah, sure.
She loves playing a character. So she sees someone in a witch's hat and she's like, oh, wow. And I'm like, we have to guide her, and we have to, you know, we're not going to condemn anyone. We're not going to be like, they're doing it bad. No, it's about just saying and guiding her and teaching her the perspective that maybe we have, or the whole concept of, we're not celebrating darkness, we're celebrating light, and light means Jesus. You can still have sweeties, just doesn't mean you're going to dress up in a certain way and go and knock in on someone's door or go to a party. Well, let's have a light party. Let's celebrate in a glow party. Let's get some glow sticks out and have a dance around the house. So it's finding ways to bring joy to her in that isn't avoiding it from her, but not celebrating it, I guess. That would
Yeah.
be one of our ideas. One of my concepts for it is that, like, she's very intrigued by it. Within like the school setting, within the nursery settings, we, would say to the teachers, please don't let her do any Halloween craft. But I was very clear in the sense of, but if it's natural, so if there's a picture of a bat, she can colour in a bat because a bat is real. If there is a picture of a cat, she can colour in a cat because a cat is real. A pumpkin, do you know what I mean? But don't go drawing a scary face on a pumpkin. She doesn't need that.
Right.
Or she doesn't need a witch's picture because in the sense of what's real to a child right now of her age, like she can color in a bat. I'd love to see a drawing of a bat. It's an animal.
Sure.
So there's like allowing her to be, like, it's the whole scripture you said, it's like in the world but not of the world. It's like she can be around those kind of things, but it's trying to guide her and teach her and train her in that. So within a boundary, I guess, within a boundary.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
just one of the you actually explained that really, really well, and off the back of it, that your kids will naturally, as a parent, you'll naturally be like, I feel like my kid's missing out, or your kid will be like, but I'm missing out. And I think it's a brilliant moment and tension, because there'll be 100 other moments in the next 10, 15 years of parenting, I imagine, where we feel like our kid is potentially missing out in that moment, but in the long term, they're really not. And I think in a world where there's a lack of discipline and a lack of boundaries and guidance, I'm sorry, but if they're missing out on that little activity, they're fine. They're a child. They'll be able to have other experiences that are far greater. And I think in the grand scheme of things, as you said, Meg, there's a whole host of other things we can do to make them feel like they're not missing out. But also, if we're constantly just making sure that our child doesn't ever have the word no, or doesn't ever feel like, oh, I can't do that or do that, then everything's just permitted and everything's yes, which is not going to bring a healthy child. And then, like, that's why there's the issues we have today, right? So I think, there's no harm in just being like, do you know what? No, we don't get involved in that. But here's what we can get involved in, just as you said, Meg.
And I think it's good, isn't it, to question, the fruit of things, because we are called to protect our kids. So on a very basic level, I can remember as a child, my parents went to a Halloween party. It was very unusual. We didn't celebrate Halloween, but they appeared once dressed up. My mum was a witch and my dad was dressed up in this like skeleton outfit. And I can remember being really scared and looking at them like, you don't look like mum and dad, like what is going on, and feeling really weird about it. And it's the only recollection I have of them ever going to a Halloween party or any Halloween party as a child at all, but it really did freak me out. And so I think if you're going to instill a sense of fear, then it's just not a good thing. So I think it's being wise, isn't it, in the fruit of things, and not kind of pursuing that. And I think at the time my parents probably didn't really realize particularly what they were doing. They were just going to a party. It was what it was, at that particular time. But I think as a parent now, like, just making those decisions and stuff like that, and the impact that it can have, and like you're saying, if fear is the response, then that is never from God. And I don't see how you can make fear a fun thing. It's just not. And you don't ever want to try and make it a fun thing, because it's not a fun thing. So it is those boundaries, but it's protecting your kids in that. I don't want them to feel fear. I want them to be happy. I want them to enjoy parties, and for it to be a good thing all round, not somehow celebrating something that actually isn't good.
It's so true. And it's true to recognize, like, we've not particularly experienced Hazel encounter the fear of it yet, and for your children they haven't particularly encountered the fear, but it's good to recognize that there is fear that can be instilled. And regularly we talk to Hazel about fear, even sometimes when she goes to sleep and has a nightmare or something. It's like within, you're explaining to her, perfect love casts out all fear. And what is perfect love? Perfect love is Jesus. And where does Jesus live? He lives in your heart. So that means he is always with you, and he will always protect you. And it's within those moments, it's not acknowledging the fear, but it's shining the light of Jesus on the fear.
Exactly.
And recognizing that he overcomes all, and he is a good God who has good plans for his children. And if we are his children, then he's got good plans for us. I just love that we've been able to talk about this today, and I think even just shining light into areas that maybe parents feel a bit unsure about. I know I regularly would speak to my mum friends and be like, how do you do this? Or what have you done in the past? Or we're privileged enough to be a part of churches that celebrate light parties or glow parties. And there's an opportunity to even invite our friends into a moment of light. And if you've got something within your church, or if you want to be a part of it, go find a local church that can have a light party where we celebrate the joy of Jesus in such a dark season. But guys, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you everyone for joining as we have talked through parenting through Halloween. We hope you have enjoyed it and it's inspired you to think about how you parent through this season. For more content like this, then we would love for you to head over to cbneurope.com/devo, or subscribe to our YouTube page and discover more of all that we have to talk about within CBN. God bless you, and we will see you soon.